Have you ever asked a totally innocent question and somehow started a fight? Like, genuinely, you just wanted to understand something and suddenly the other person is defensive and you have no idea what just happened. That used to confuse me so much. But now finally, I know why that happens. And honestly, it's going to change how I ask questions forever.
Welcome to Unafraid Living, a podcast where you will learn to fear less and live more. I'm Kim, and I'm here to ask questions that you might be thinking and maybe getting some clarity. I'm joined by Suzette, a certified brain health professional. Let's call her Coach Suzette.
Yes, I do like that better, Coach Suzette, rather than brain health professional, because I am a life coach and my passion is helping you embrace the life that you actually really want to live. I'll show you how to quiet the fear so that you can face each day with confidence and resilience. Hey friends, Suzette here, your brain health professional. If fear or anxiety has been ruining your life lately, our Unafraid course was built for you. The Unafraid course helps you retrain your brain to move out of fear and into resilience, one small shift at a time with proven, practical, and simple tools. Affordable options let you work at your own pace or join me in our private community, all for less than most therapy sessions. No more excuses. Be your own advocate and sign up for the course at unafraidcourse.com to start rewiring your brain today.
Welcome back to Unafraid Living and our Say It Unafraid series. In the last episode, we talked about why communication can feel risky.
And today, we're taking the next step, understanding processing styles and how it can cause conflict. It's crazy how questions, silence, or even processing delays get misunderstood so easily.
This episode is for you if you have ever thought, why does every conversation with this person turn into a thing?
A thing. Or for anyone who, when asking questions for understanding or clarification, was met with defensiveness. Ooh, I hate that. You don't trust me kind of a remark. Maybe not in those words, but you clearly know. You hear that message.
Let's start with breaking this down. Suzette, what are we talking about?
Well, most communication problems aren't about a person's poor communication skills. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. I mean, some people are terrible communicators. That is true. But they have problems with all of their relationships. But a lot of us only have issues with certain people, like maybe a coworker or your partner. Really common. It's quite likely that you are just processing differently and neither one of you have learned how to adapt.
Different processing styles, which I, especially at a younger age, had no idea about. It just was not in my realm of thought at all. Different ways of thinking about things and how to think through things. I just have always been this way. I assumed everybody else was.
Right. And I don't think it's about age. I think a lot of people don't have a clue and they might be 75.
Right.
You know, it's just not something we learn about.
That's true.
So an easy one to pinpoint is internal and external processors. We've all heard about those. People who are internal processors, they just think about things and then they come to a conclusion. But external processors, they want to say things out loud. But there are so many nuances to external processors. Not all external processors want the same thing. First of all, though, we have to recognize that, internal and external processors are very, very different kinds of processors. And so we have to figure out just how to deal with that. But then it gets a little trickier because then we've got to figure out what that external processor really wants. So if we don't recognize the different processing styles, we're going to get irritated and we're going to start assigning meaning where none was intended. Usually not consciously, but we do it subconsciously.
Here's a question. Am I internal or external?
You?
Uh-huh.
External.
Okay, yeah. You know I'm a top router.
Mm-hmm.
And you, I think, are an internal for the most part because you always say things like, I've got to think about that or pray on that or give me some time on that.
Well, that is true. I think other people that are close to me would say I'm an external processor.
Okay.
And I do like to bounce things off people.
So what you're telling me is there are two types, but they have layers.
They have layers.
Okay.
Yes, they do. So let's talk about external processors first. These are the people who think by talking. There's several types. And sometimes people want input. That's me. I love to bounce things off people. I want their feedback and figure it out. I like to brainstorm. But sometimes external processors just want to monologue out loud. They don't want to hear your input, at least not right now. So instead of being silent, they're working through things as they talk. I've had some coaching clients like that. Literally, I've had some coaching clients that I feel like, why did you hire me? I don't have to say a thing, but they come to these great conclusions and they think I'm a great coach, you know?
Because you let them talk it out to themselves?
I guess so.
Okay.
And I do ask questions, you know, to help them to clarify things. But when people are external processors and they just want to talk out loud and they don't want your input, you got to figure that out. Oh, they're talking. They don't want a conversation. They just want a monologue. And that's how they figure things out.
So it sounds like you're saying you got to wait for them to ask questions for your input so that they can have their clarity of their thoughts.
Yeah, sometimes it's best to wait for them to give any input at all. Questions can help them organize their ideas or reduce uncertainty. It can help them feel comfortable enough to move forward, but it's tricky if that's how they're processing, because you got to figure out the right timing. Maybe they don't want your opinion. Maybe they do. you know? Do they want validation, or do they just want your other ideas so that they can think? So at this stage, they're trying to figure out their own thoughts. So side note, people with a high need for affirmation are quite often external processors because they need to feel validated, and your affirming interjections really help them. So when you say right on, for sure,
that's it.
Yeah, anything that helps them to feel like their conclusions are good ones helps them to feel secure in their own thoughts and beliefs. Now, that's not to say that they don't want to hear your opinions too. They might, but they'll probably ask you for those. And maybe they won't ask you right now. Maybe it'll be at a different stage in the communication.
Okay. So externals, there's a whole lot of layers and things that you've got to figure out with them before you can communicate well. What about internal processors? Are there lots of layers too?
Well, they think more quietly. They sort things out internally and they form their thoughts and opinions before they speak. So sometimes they need time before responding, like what you said with me.
Right.
You know, sometimes I do process internally, I guess. I'm both. I'm really complex. You got to really know how to deal with me. So especially when there's something important, they need time. But some internal processors are really quick. Oof, I find that just so annoying when people can figure things out, think through things, and come to a conclusion really quickly, because I don't. And when they're doing it quietly like that, it feels to me like they haven't thought things through well, but they just think differently than I do.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's kind of annoying, but yeah.
It is kind of annoying. You know, I understand that because my husband is a thinker also. So I've got to, and I'm a talker outer. So we've had to find this rhythm, and I understand if it's me that needs to come to a conclusion or him. You know, we've got to work on each other's processing styles.
You got to give him space.
Exactly.
And he has to give you space.
Or he has to talk to me. One of the two, you know?
Sure.
But of course, neither one is better than the other. We're just different.
Just different. That's how life works. Most of us process our thoughts individually, and that's something even external processors do. We think through things, we land on conclusions, but somewhere along the way, we quietly, well, hopefully it's quietly, we quietly hope that everyone else will land in the same place. We always want people to agree with us, right?
Of course, yeah.
That's how life works, and that's okay. Because processing is the first stage of communication. that's not the end. We've got to get to the next step, which is alignment. So processing is about forming conclusions. Alignment is about working together to come to common ground. So we've come to our own conclusion, but maybe it's not the conclusion that works for the two of you together.
Going back to last week's episode, you told us about being a team, and that's kind of in that same vein.
Yes.
Even if it's not your partner, it's your best friend or something,
or coworker.
Right. You're a team, and so that's how you can help to find common ground.
Problems happen when we try to align before processing is finished, and when we treat our conclusion as the only valid one. So both people need to be finished with their processing. They need to know why they landed where they landed, and the conclusion needs to be open-handed. So holding it lightly, but that's hard to do when we've come to a conclusion.
That's right. That's it. And we figured it out. And that's my conclusion.
It's the truth as I know it.
Absolute truth. So when the questions come too soon, while somebody is still processing, they don't feel curious, right? They feel kind of pressured maybe.
Sure. Like an interrogation.
Right.
And so people feel annoyed or controlled. And even if someone is attached to their conclusion that they've reached, questions can really feel like, you don't trust me. You know, of course I have the right answer.
So that's when you get the glare stare or the hurt response or the why don't you trust me, like you were saying.
Yeah, those kinds of reactions are really common at this stage. But the truth is, the question asker isn't trying to tear anything down. What did we say last time?
Get clarity.
Yes. They're trying to understand and move toward a solution everyone can live with, even if it's not perfect. So here are the stages. We think our thoughts individually, even external processors. We think things through, land on conclusions, and somewhere along the way, we quietly hope everyone else will land in the same place.
Wouldn't that be great if we all landed in the same place?
Oh, yes, it would be. Objectively, we know it's not possible. It's not how life works, but it's what we hope for, and that's all right. We're all dreamers, I guess. Processing is just one of those stages, though. So the alignment part, that's where we go from the thinking to the relational part. We're working on getting common ground.
Okay. Many may not even know or realize this next step is needed. They've thought through it, they've come up with their conclusion or decision, and they're good to go. Because, of course, everyone came to the same conclusion they did, right?
Of course, because it's the right conclusion, right? You nailed it. But if there is no room for alignment, then they're taking control. Maybe without realizing it. Okay. Maybe they are narcissists. Who knows? But this comes in so many ways. And some people really believe it's always narcissistic behavior. It's not. Some people that's how they think through like this process of trying to find alignment. They don't realize that their conclusion is the only conclusion. Right?
Okay.
They don't realize that. A narcissist knows that his way is the best way. Her way is the best way and the only way. So it's not always narcissistic.
So let's say that for now, you're dealing with a reasonable person, not a narcissist, who cares about other people for real. And they're trying to understand and move toward a solution that everyone can live with, even if it's not perfect.
Well, that's the best place to be. But even so, there can still be conflict.
And where does this conflict come from?
Well, here's where we start sharing our conclusions and people start reacting to the other's conclusions, not to their intent, but to what they're thinking that they're saying. So it's time to start asking questions for clarification.
And this is where that mind reading has to be turned off, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So let's talk about questions specifically, because this is such a big one. Like you said, people can feel like they're being interrogated by your question. So don't you think how you frame a question matters?
Well, it does matter. It really matters. But you're never going to be perfect at framing the question just right, because the frame lands differently depending on who the receiver is. So how their day is gone, what they internally believe about you. There's so many factors that play in. So yes, framing a question is helpful and important, and we can try our best to frame it in a way that the receiver is going to receive it well. But the receiver really does have a huge part to play in how they let that question land on them at that moment. Okay. For the person on the receiving end, a benign question can feel like, I don't trust you. We talked about that before. Or maybe they're just plain old defensive and they think, you're wrong.
Yeah.
I landed. You're wrong. This can incite defensiveness, but it doesn't necessarily mean your question should have been framed better. It could just be them. Maybe they're having a bad day, or maybe they just are defensive.
Okay.
Maybe they're a narcissist. That's for another day, though.
Okay. What about when the questions do come too fast?
Oh, yeah. Timing, tone, and quantity matter. Even good questions can overwhelm someone if they're too many too fast.
I've got to try to hold back.
Yes. Especially someone whose nervous system is already on edge.
Can you explain this a little bit more?
Well, sure. Questions aren't inherently critical. Sometimes they are just needing clarification. They're a thinking tool, not a control tactic for many, many people.
But without context, can't they land wrong?
Well, yeah. So that's why naming the intention, it can help. It matters, and it can really help. So something like, I need to ask so that I can understand might help. Or when the conversation feels super dicey, naming your intention before your question can also help. So instead of jumping straight in, try prefacing it with something to help them understand your intent.
I'm asking this because I want to understand, not because I'm upset.
That's a good one.
Okay. What about I want to get clarity.
Right. So you can both feel comfortable moving forward.
Okay. I can see how that can completely change how a question is received.
Yes. So let's talk about slowing the pace.
Ugh. Hard one.
Yes, for some. 1 or 2 thoughtful questions is very different than 5 being belted at you all at once, rapid fire.
Right. I have a hard time remembering this in the moment, and I'm sure I am not alone.
Yeah, well, it's probably true, but don't feel bad about it. Just be aware and scale it back. So next, you want to ask one question, then pause. So sticking to the subject matter is really helpful. So one question, then pause, let the other person, without filling the space with our own words, it gives them time to think. Because what our own words, sometimes instead of clarifying, if we just keep going with a simple question might be really clear. But when we keep talking, we convolute that question, and it's harder for the other person to really figure it out. What are we really saying? So sticking to one question at a time always gets a better response. So your curiosity isn't wrong. It's great. So remembering the rules of communication is what's important here.
Okay. One question, clear intention, more space, and then I would say get clarity.
Yeah. This helps you build trust instead of tension.
Okay.
So 2 T words. You want trust. You don't want tension.
That's right.
And oh, how I wish I had remembered this in the heat of the moment so many times.
So many times. I know people like this, and questions totally stress them out. It puts them into a state of frazzlement.
Frazzlement. I like that word.
They don't know what to say. They don't know how to act.
Yes, they feel attacked.
Yeah. Sometimes they just shut down.
Yes, they feel stressed. They feel like they're being personally attacked, or like they're having to defend themselves. So remembering when people are asking questions, it's just think about it like they need to understand it's not due to mistrust. If we can have that frame of mind, then it makes those questions land so differently, because you can work on a solution that works for both of you, which helps your relationship.
So if I'm one of those people who get overstressed or shut down by so many questions, it's okay to say something like, I need a minute to think about that, or can we slow down a bit or give me a second, pause?
Yeah. That's not avoidance. That's self-awareness. And that's honoring. You know, in the moment, you might feel like, oh, that's putting the other person off. But actually, for the other person, knowing that you want to think about things can be honoring.
It actually is very helpful to know that you want to think about it and you're not just ignoring them and not answering them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking from experience here. Let them know you need to think about it.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'll slow down here, and it will help to give the question asker a pause.
Yes.
Okay. So Suzette, give our listeners one thing to try this week.
Oh, there's so many you could try, but how about this? Before asking your next question, or even maybe before you respond to a question, let's just pause and ask ourselves what our intention is. Am I really trying to understand? Am I trying to find alignment? Or do I actually want to kind of start a fight? Am I feeling defensive and just want to egg them on?
Right.
You know, sometimes the person who is defensive is the one wanting to start the fight. They might accuse you, but it's really them. So it's a hard tension to be in when there is that kind of conflict going on. But our intentions really matter.
Right.
So checking ourselves, what are my intentions? Let the other person deal with their own.
Thinking before speaking. Haven't we all heard that?
Oh, yeah.
So that's the same thing.
It is
asking
the same
yourself
thing.
these questions.
Mm-hmm. Naming your purpose first for clarity is a lot more likely to get a good response.
Nice. Okay, now just to remember this in the moment, what do you want our listeners to remember from this episode?
I think it's really important to know that there are stages of communication. We have to give each other space and grace to think through things and draw our own conclusions, whether we're external or internal processors. That's where we come to our own conclusions. We need to know what those conclusions are, why we landed where we landed. And then we've got to move into the alignment phase. If we don't move into the alignment phase, you're in big trouble because one person's controlling things, and that's not okay. So if you want good communication, you've got to communicate, right? Mm-hmm. And then just remember that as you're working through that alignment phase, that there are some things to make it go smoother. Offering space and grace and holding your own conclusions lightly is important. And when you start asking questions and needing clarification, just ask them one at a time. Give them space and let them answer.
Thank you again for joining us. We hope you're walking away with something that helps you feel a little calmer, a little more confident, and a lot more free.
And if you're ready to go beyond just listening and start living unafraid, come on over to the Unafraid course. You'll find all the details at unafraidcourse.com.
Follow us wherever you listen to podcasts and on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. And be sure to check out the show notes for any links.